She was the most famous star in the world, and she knew too much. Marilyn Monroe had become a woman filled with secrets. Secrets that made her a dangerous liability to some of the most powerful men in the world, and ultimately cost her her life.
Marilyn Monroe did not commit suicide. She was murdered.
She was a girl that knew too much, and she ended up dead one morning.
What really happened to the famous Hollywood legend, and what did she know that made her such a threat?
So she said, that's it. I'm going to talk. I'm going to tell the press everything.
From gangsters and blackmail to JFK and UFOs, forget what you think you know about Marilyn Monroe, because the more you dig, you realize this goes way deeper than just a troubled movie star. Sunday, August 5th, 1962. News spreads like a bolt of lightning across the nation. Hollywood bombshell Marilyn Monroe is dead. As the nation learns the devastating news, Marilyn's ex-husband, baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, arrived at her home on a mission. According to DiMaggio's friend Harry Hall, the grieving Hall of Famer was searching for what he referred to as a book amid her possessions. He was too late. The house had already been searched by two separate groups of men, both there for the same thing. It was a little red diary in which Marilyn recorded the innermost details of her life, not only her affairs with the Kennedy brothers and the secrets they told her, but more explosive information about organized crime and its connections to intelligence agencies.
He did keep a diary, yes. I saw it. And so did Bobby. That's why Bobby got very angry.
I always felt that diary was a walking time bomb she was carrying around with her and keeping in her file cabinet, which, by the way, was broken into the night of her death.
In short, it was a book of secrets, some of which went so far above national security, they worried men in the darkest corridors of the federal government. Marilyn Monroe had been having an affair with the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and his brother, the Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. At the time, such a scandal was so shocking, it would have been dynamite to the Kennedys' Camelot. Marilyn had begun recording details of these encounters in her little red diary. On top of this, she knew other secrets garnered from her connections with various organized crime figures throughout her rise to fame, that the CIA worked in tandem with organized crime, even keeping some mafiosos on their payroll. Her home was extensively bugged by at least 3 entities eager to gain blackmail material on the Kennedys or eavesdrop on their conversations.
Very revealing in the documents dated, ironically, August 2nd, 1962, just 2 days before her death. And in that document, it indicates that Marilyn's house was under electronic surveillance by the CIA.
The couple that bought Marilyn's home discovered bugs and wires everywhere and had to spend thousands of dollars having them removed. During her liaisons with the president, she was told about various government secrets. Here's where the story gets even stranger. According to some researchers, these secrets included information about UFOs and crashed wreckage of an unknown origin that President Kennedy had inspected. The idea comes from a leaked government memo dated the day before Marilyn's death, describing a wiretapped conversation between Marilyn confidant Howard Rothberg and reporter Dorothy Kilgallen. In it, Rothberg describes how Marilyn knew of a visit by President Kennedy to, quote, a secret airbase for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space.
Rothberg indicated in so many words that she had secrets to tell, no doubt arising from her tryst with the President and the Attorney General. One such secret mentions the visit by the President and a secret airbase for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space.
JFK was very interested in space, as well as the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and had supposedly requested information on the UFO topic. Could the Things from outer space, to which the memo refers, be debris from the 1947 crash site in Roswell, New Mexico? Given the level of secrecy surrounding the UFO topic, it would certainly have put Marilyn's life in jeopardy if the wrong people believed she might tell what she knew. By the summer of '62, the Kennedy brothers were trying to break things off with Marilyn and were no longer taking her calls. Angry at being passed around and discarded, she threatened to call a press conference and go public with her affair with the Kennedys and all the secrets she knew. Monroe expressed this to several close friends, including former husband Bob Slatzer.
Marilyn told me about the press conference by long-distance telephone. I was back east when this all was taking place, and I had asked her if she had mentioned that to anybody else, and she said yes, a couple of people, very nonchalantly. But the reason I had warned her, really, to be careful about who she told about the press conference was the fact that, thinking at that time, as she did, that her house might be bugged and her telephones might be tapped, I felt it was quite dangerous for her.
Had he sat down and explained it to her, possibly she wouldn't have had that feeling. But all of a sudden, she couldn't get through to him. She had no idea what happened. Why couldn't she get through? So she said, that's it. I'm going to talk. I'm going to tell the press everything. And she would have. And he knew that she would have.
She said, I'm going to blow the lid off of this whole damned thing. And I asked her what she meant by that. And she said, my involvement with the Kennedys, it goes much deeper than what most people think.
On what would be the final day of Monroe's life, Bobby Kennedy made a clandestine trip to Los Angeles in a Hail Mary effort to placate her and get his hands on the diary if he could. Given these circumstances, let's examine the mysterious death of Marilyn Monroe. 4:25 a.m., August 5th, 1962. What had been a routine Saturday night for Sergeant Jack Clemens at the LAPD headquarters was suddenly interrupted by a strange call he would never forget for the rest of his life. On the phone was a man claiming to be the doctor of film star Marilyn Monroe, stating the most famous woman in the world was dead. Suspecting a possible prank, Officer Clemens nevertheless stated he would be right there. Switching on the light atop his patrol car, he headed straight for 5th Helena Drive. The loud siren pierced the summer night air like a needle to the vein. If the phone call seemed odd, the scene he would find at the actress's home was downright bizarre. After knocking on the door, he waited approximately 1 minute, during which time he heard whispers coming from the other side of the door, before it was finally opened by Marilyn's maid, Mrs. Murray. He was led to the bedroom. There, on crumpled bed sheets, lie the naked body of Norma Jean Baker, the girl who had charmed a nation, seduced a president, and learned dangerous secrets along the way. Accompanying her were 2 doctors, her psychiatrist Dr. Greenson and her regular physician Dr. Engelberg, who informed Sergeant Clemens that Marilyn had taken an overdose of prescription barbiturates. The seasoned officer immediately sensed a cover-up, saying that it appeared to him the scene had, quote, been arranged. Marilyn's body was neatly laid out on the bed, nothing like someone who had undergone the throes of a drug overdose. The room showed no signs of disarray or vomit, which is typically present in such cases, and there was no drinking glass in the room. The last point is especially important because Marilyn was notoriously unable to swallow even a small aspirin without something to drink.
Dr. Greenson, he pointed out to me that on a nightstand by her bed there was about 8 prescription bottles that contained various kinds of prescription drugs. And they were all empty. And I could still see the man as he stood there, and he goes like this. She must have taken all of these. He directs my attention to this. And I walk over, and I stick my head over, and I look down, and they're all empty. And we look for a glass. she could have used to swallow these pills, and there was no glass in that room.
Here was a girl that had trouble taking an aspirin without a glass of water. And I have never seen her go and take pills or capsules without some type of a liquid. It was with her, she always said, I can't take something unless I've got something to drink it down with.
One could never take that many Nembutal without water. The tablets themselves would choke the patient and be so dry and sticky in his mouth he couldn't tolerate it. And without water being present, I don't see how she could have gotten them down. And obviously she didn't get them down because they were never found in her stomach.
Furthermore, the water to the adjacent bathroom had been shut off for remodeling work, so how was Miss Monroe supposed to have swallowed several bottles of pills? The housekeeper, Evelyn Murray, who was strangely washing clothes when the police arrived, changed her story several times about how and when she found Marilyn's body, originally claiming to have found it at 12:30 a.m. When asked why it took 4 hours after finding Marilyn dead to call the police, the officer was unable to get a satisfactory answer from Murray or either of the doctors. Upon further scrutiny, the whole story doesn't add up. The autopsy found no traces of undigested pill capsules in her stomach, despite claims she ingested an entire bottle of pills. The Nembutal pills Marilyn is alleged to have taken were covered in a bright yellow dye, and yet no traces of this dye were found in her stomach. Had Marilyn taken a lethal overdose of pills, digestion would have stopped immediately upon death, leaving unmistakable bright yellow residue in the stomach. Furthermore, there were no refractive crystals in the stomach, which is a necessary byproduct of the digestive process. The absence of these crystals means Marilyn did not orally ingest the drugs that killed her. And yet enough drugs were found in her system to kill 3 elephants, as Dr. Noguchi put it. The sheer amount of barbiturates in her system, over 15 times the lethal dose, is suspicious.
The level in Marilyn Monroe's blood was 4.5 milligram percent. It would have taken approximately 40 to 42 such capsules in order for that level to have been achieved.
How could such a high level enter her bloodstream without leaving some undigested pills in the stomach? It couldn't. As Deputy District Attorney John Miner put it, quote, "The notion of oral intake of the barbiturates simply does not scientifically add up. It just didn't happen that way." But if Marilyn didn't swallow the pills, how did such a lethal level of barbiturates enter her system? One theory researchers point to is the possibility that she was deliberately given a lethal injection of barbiturates. Although the coroner claims there were no needle marks on Marilyn's body, that doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't any. Marks can fade quickly, and there was unexplained bruising on her thigh, which would be consistent with an injection mark. This would also explain how such a high level of Nembutal could be present in her blood without leaving traces of pill residue in the stomach. Still, some theorists maintain Marilyn was murdered in an even stranger way. One popular theory is that Marilyn was given an enema containing a lethal dose of liquid Nembutal. This would then be absorbed into the system, resulting in an overdose, explaining the lack of needle marks or pill residue. It would, however, result in bruising of the colon, which was noted in the autopsy.
The Nembutal. Until the time that she died, there was an appreciable period of time, probably not less than an hour or two. The capsule has a yellow dye. On opening the stomach, there was no dye stain. How did the barbiturate get into her? One of the findings of the autopsy was that the lower portion of the colon, which is the large intestine, was discolored. It was a deep purplish color. If by means of the barbiturate coming through the use of an enema, the medical facts would be satisfied, and that would lead to the conclusion that Miss Monroe was murdered.
Peter Lawford's wife once asked him how Marilyn Monroe died, to which she received a curious reply. Lawford said, quote, "Marilyn took her last big enema." Regardless of which method was used, both indicate one thing: murder. Marilyn did not have access to liquid Nembutal, and certainly not the high amount that was found in her body, and she certainly would not inject herself with anything. While we may not yet know exactly how Marilyn died, what we do know is that shortly afterwards a massive cover-up went into effect. According to the book Who Killed Marilyn, a film industry executive with close ties to CIA business interests in Hollywood told author Tony Siaka that the CIA came into Marilyn's home that night and sanitized the scene. Any trace that may have connected her to the Kennedys was destroyed, and everything that would make it appear like a suicide was put in place. If this account is accurate, they would most certainly have taken Marilyn's tapes, files, and diary, which chronicled her affairs with the Kennedys, information about organized crime, and other national secrets. The time of death was changed. It is now known that Marilyn died much earlier than first reported. Marilyn's agent, Arthur Jacobs, and his fiancée were enjoying a concert at the Hollywood Bowl when they were notified of an urgent phone call. Mr. Jacobs returned to inform her Marilyn was dead, and they left immediately. Jacobs' wife is certain it was well before 11 p.m. Most researchers place the actual time of Marilyn's death around 10 to 10:30 p.m. on August 4th. This would make it roughly 6 hours before the police were officially notified. Plenty of time for a large-scale cover-up to be set into motion, and Bobby Kennedy to get out of Dodge. And that appears to be precisely what happened. Shortly after midnight, Beverly Hills police officer Lynn Franklin pulled over a black sedan going 40 miles per hour over the speed limit. Cautiously approaching the vehicle, he was in no way prepared for what he was about to see. Inside was his boss's boss, the Attorney General of the United States, Bobby Kennedy, being driven by brother-in-law Peter Lawford.
I knew Kennedy well. I'd been on security assignments with he and his Secret Service several times, and it was Robert Kennedy.
From there, it is believed he was taken to the Los Angeles airport, where by one account, an Air Force jet whisked him away. In the early hours of August 4th, the General Telephone Company in Santa Monica was visited by men describing themselves as federal agents, who insist they turn over the telephone records for Marilyn Monroe's residence. Corrupt LA officials ordered all evidence to be pointed towards suicide. As Monroe biographer Norman Mailer put it, quote, "The word was out to keep this thing a suicide, not make it a murder." A directive that apparently extended to the coroner's office as well, where Marilyn's death was ruled a, quote, "probable suicide," despite the fact that there was no pill residue found in her stomach, and the small intestine was never tested. Had the small intestine been tested and failed to show refractive crystals from the Nembutal, it would have undoubtedly meant the death was a homicide. Later, Dr. Noguchi said he felt uneasy about the situation and asked that toxicology run a test, at which time he was told the samples had disappeared. Former LA Deputy Coroner Lionel Grandison raised concerns after he was asked to sign Marilyn's death certificate without the required paperwork. When he first refused to sign the death certificate, he was threatened with being fired if he did not.
Lionel Grandison believes that the true circumstances of Marilyn's death were deliberately covered up by Dr. Curfey. At first, Grandison refused to sign the official death certificate.
When the file came to my desk for signing, I went to see Dr. Curfey, and I asked Dr. Curfey for the paperwork that goes on with the file. And Dr. Curfey told me, he says, well, don't worry about that. Just go in and sign the death certificate, and we will, I'll take care of that later. I voiced my concerns about the lack of information that was included in the file. And Dr. Curfey, and this last time, and this was not the first time he had told me, He said, sign this case, let's get it out of her hair, or else I'm going to do something. So I left and went back to my desk, signed the death certificate, put it in the file, and allowed it to be filed with the health department.
Her death was ruled a, quote, probable suicide. Contrary to the notion pushed by Peter Lawford and other so-called friends of Marilyn at the time, she was not depressed or suicidal.
Running wild, lost control.
Part of this theory hinges on the false notion that her career was on the downslide. While it's true she had been fired from the movie she was filming at the time, Marilyn had quietly been rehired by Fox at twice her previous salary. Numerous acquaintances who spoke with her during the time leading up to her mysterious death have suggested she was in great spirits.
Unfortunately, too many people have hung crepe where it doesn't belong. In the first place, that last week of her life, she was reinstated at her old studio to finish the picture. Number one. Number two, she had bought 2 brand new wardrobes at Saks Fifth Avenue. She had made plans to go back and close up the lease on her apartment back in New York the following month, which would have been September. For a person depressed and a person anticipating suicide, allegedly, this certainly was not characteristic from where I sit.
She was as happy as I've ever seen her. She looked better than I'd ever seen her. And I certainly don't think she was suicidal at the time of her death. I think something fishy went on.
I thought it was very strange that she would commit suicide after talking with her on that Friday night before she was found dead, because she had told me the different things that she had planned in her life for the next week, if not a few things the next month.
Hollywood insiders from the era have also spoken out, insisting Marilyn was murdered. Among them are Marlon Brando, Debbie Reynolds, and Godfather actor Gianni Russo. Many researchers believe Marilyn Monroe to have been the first MKUltra presidential model. Marilyn came from an abusive childhood in foster care after her mother was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Such a background would have created the type of dissociative base required for trauma-based mind control programming. There is considerable evidence that she developed the glamorous Marilyn Monroe persona as an alter to her everyday Norma Jean.
When I think of Marilyn Monroe, basically I'm thinking of Norma Jean Baker, and I'm thinking of Norma Jean Baker as a woman who was an actress, who constructed a number of personalities, and one of them is Marilyn Monroe.
It wasn't Marilyn Monroe, it was Norma Jean. It was like a little girl coming out. And then as she got closer to the camera and the lights, I saw this transition that the number of people have seen from Norma Jean to Marilyn Monroe, and suddenly she was the film star, and it was just a magic moment. And then moments later she was Sugar Cane, the character she was playing in the movie. So I saw this transition of 3 totally different people in a matter of 2 minutes.
So we were walking down the street together, nobody paying any attention to her. And she looked at me and she said, hey, you want to see me be her? Had no idea what she meant by be her. So I said, sure. And she made some inner adjustment. Almost like, you know, if you see a lamp that's got a bulb in it, but the lamp is turned off, all she did was turn the lamp on. And suddenly she started to glow, and people started stopping her. Oh my God, is that, oh, it can't be, oh, it must be. And it was fascinating to me that she was aware enough of what she did to be able to do it.
Upon further investigation, it would appear Dr. Greenson was Marilyn's handler at the time of her death. It was he who installed Mrs. Murray as a maid in Marilyn's home, neglecting to tell her that Murray was a former psychiatric nurse and that she was reporting back to Greenson on Marilyn's activities.
I always felt that Eunice Murray was in the house as an asset to Dr. Greenson in reporting to Dr. Greenson about Marilyn's activities, and a further effort to keep control of her and know her state of mind.
A photographer described a bizarre incident to biographer Anthony Summers that occurred shortly before Marilyn's demise. The photographer was at Marilyn's home when a package was delivered containing a stuffed tiger. Whatever the gift meant, her mood changed immediately, and the photo shoot was over. Could this bizarre gift have been a reference to MK Ultra kitten programming, or some other message entirely? Regardless, shortly thereafter, Marilyn was dead. Modern pop stars such as Britney Spears, Katy Perry, and Nicki Minaj pay homage to Monroe. Whether she was under mind manipulation or not, Monroe was undoubtedly under the control of powerful figures from the dark side of the entertainment industry. She is rumored to have been a one-time girlfriend to Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey before she was famous. This picture, taken from behind, appears to show Marilyn being escorted by two figures in black hooded robes. Although there is no way to verify whether the woman in the fur coat is indeed Marilyn Monroe, the image alone is enough to give you chills. Like that of the Mona Lisa, Marilyn's immortal image is both mesmerizing and mystifying, captivating and concealing. What secrets lie hidden behind those blue eyes, we may never know. But what is no secret is the undying place she'll have in the hearts of millions.
She was a very simple girl, and I mean that in the nicest sense. She was not complicated. She was Norma Jean, who when she put on this beautiful, glamorous makeup became Marilyn Monroe. People complicated her life, situations, studios, but she always remained little Norma Jean.
This was a girl who really wanted to do something. Marilyn loved Ella Fitzgerald, and Marilyn made a deal with the head of the nightclub that if they would book her, she would come every night.
I mean, they kind of take like pieces out of you, and I don't think that they realize it. You know, they're kind of grabbing pieces out of you, and gee, you know, you do want to stay intact.
What do you think was in Marilyn's Book of Secrets? And what's your opinion on her murder? Let me know in the comments section. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of future uploads. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without the contribution of incredible people who contribute to the support of this channel by becoming Patreon members and donating on PayPal. So I want to give a special thanks to them. If you would like to help support this channel, please follow the link in the description. Thanks for watching.